Hello, I'm Richard with EV4U Custom Conversions. And in this video we're going to conclude the inspection of the motor from the transporter, the Volkswagen Transporter Doka. In the last video we left you with the thought that we had solved the issue, and the issue was that the encoder was not working. But we also had a rubbing issue where some pins on the inside of the flywheel, in other words on the side that the flywheel is against the adapter, a couple little split pins were hitting the adapter bolts, the bolts that hold the adapter to the motor. And so that was kind of where we left it. And so we ordered a new optical sensor because that's what we assumed was bad. And give you a close-up of the optical sensor. So there's a little encoder ring that goes between the little slit in this reader, and it has little holes in it. So as those holes pass by this optical reader, it's basically on, off. It's binary. And so it does two things. It allows the inverter to know where the motor is in its 360-degree rotation, and it also is able to measure the RPMs. So we thought we had these two problems, and it was kind of curious to me that the owner of the vehicle did not mention any noise. And so kind of in the back of my head I always kind of assumed that it was a certain thing, but it was just an assumption and I didn't have anything to back it up. And that was, I thought that perhaps that rotor shaft, armature shaft had moved. But we took it apart. There was no real obvious evidence that that is what happened until we received this new optical sensor. Once we received the optical sensor, we pulled off the cover, and this is an external sensor, and as you saw in the previous footage. And so go to replace this optical sensor, we noticed what you're going to see in this next clip, that the little encoder ring was not going through this properly. And so that's kind of what really happened. What happened was that shaft moved approximately 3/32 of an inch, maybe a little less, and that caused this optical sensor not to read correctly, and it also caused the clearance issue on the other side, which was compounded by the fact that those pins did move out. When we installed that in the vehicle originally, those pins were flush with the back side of the flywheel. So bottom line is the motor's going back to HPVS. They're going to make some not just repairs, they're going to upgrade it, and so that's all good. So take a look at this clip and we'll let you see exactly what I'm talking about. Well, as we mentioned in previous videos, we had things that rubbed, and what we now know that happened is the entire armature shaft moved a little bit, and we can see with the encoder here, let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, you can see I'm holding the camera by hand here, so you can see this encoder ring here as it passes through the optical reader. it's rubbing up against that, the optical reader housing, and it's actually bending. See that? So there was the problem. This whole shaft moved, which threw the optical reader out and shoved the flywheel to where those pins, which must have been, you know, sticking out just a little bit, and they rubbed the bolts. Further evidence that it was the shaft that moved, and is the bottom line issue. So if we look at the other end here, and I'll see if I can, you can see that the bearing has moved away from the front cover piece. It was hard to see with the coupler on there, but removing the coupler, and what it is there's 3 Allen screws on the right here that hold that bearing in place. Well, if you have enough clutch pressure and everything, and that's a heavy-duty clutch that the, if I remember correctly, the customer provided the clutch components. But anyway, it caused this to move back. So this whole armature shaft moved longitudinally that direction, which allowed the flywheel to connect with the adapter bolt heads and move that optical reader disc to where it is flexing and we're not getting a read. So the customer never said anything about there being a noise. Now I know why. The two happened simultaneously. So as it made contact, it also quit. So anyway, mystery solved, but the case isn't solved. Talking with HPVS, we're going to send the motor back to them, and they have a fix for this. They changed this bearing setup to where the bearing is a thrust bearing on the rear cover, so that clutch pressure and so forth won't allow that shaft to move. And then we'll move the encoder to an internal bearing type that will give us an advantage there too. No more external encoder, which is, you know, open to the elements. So anyway, it'd be a big improvement. That's an update on the AC75. The armature shaft moved. That was kind of my first thought originally, but then those pins on the flywheel, you know, since they hit, it wasn't until we removed the cover on that optical reader that boom, it all flashed. And so then talking with HPVS, they said yes, these bearing retainers can bend, and so remove the coupler, got a good look at it, and now we can see that yes, the movement front and rear kind of all jives, and it makes perfect sense now. So we'll let you know once we get it back and back in the vehicle.